on this episode of Indiana Education Insight.
We have done analysis of some districts, Dr. Coopman, where I think the high water mark, there was one district where 88% of the parents were not registered to vote.
Wow, that's high.
Okay, in a public school.
Wow.
Every week, the Indiana Association of Public School Superintendents is taking you inside today's Indiana education collaboration and tomorrow's education trends. We're staying on the pulse of public school innovators throughout Indiana and beyond. Join our conversation and contribute to our upcoming topics at iapssin.org/podcast. Here's your host, Dr. J.T. Coopman.
Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Indiana Education Insight. I'm Dr. J.T. Coopman, Executive Director of the IAPSS. This podcast is being delivered by our IAPSS team and produced by our friends at Edge Media Studios. As Executive Director of IAPSS, I'm excited to bring you this weekly show where we feature Indiana education innovators from all over our great state, from students to superintendents. We also will be talking to higher education leaders and educators at the state level as we work together as proactive public education advocates. That's why IAPSS is here and why we're proud to bring you this show. Every week, we're talking about trending topics in the public education space, while also bringing in Indiana education innovators to hear their perspective on these topics. As with any organization, it takes great leadership to be successful, and that is one of the main missions of IAPSS, developing great school district leaders. It is always great to have experienced and passionate educators joining us on this show. So let's get started with today's conversation.
Topics and trends in Indiana education.
Today's guest is Mr. Robin Winston and Mr. Pat Terrell, founding partners in the Winston Terrell Group, as well as numerous public speaking engagements that they have been instrumental in shaping the conversation about Indiana public schools. And they also have the ability to look at education from various lenses, which is very important. They've been a tremendous asset to public education in Indiana. Let's find out how they view some of the issues in Indiana public schools. Welcome, Mr. Winston. Welcome, Mr. Terrell. We are absolutely thrilled to have you joining us on today's podcast. So let's get started, and why don't you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in developing and partnering in Winston Terrell?
Well, Robin and I both are big fans of public education. We're products of public education ourselves. When we formed the Winston Terrell Group back in 2001, we were focused mainly on government relations and that type of work. And then in 2008, when the legislature was considering this referendum legislation, Robin and I actually helped organize some superintendents to try to defeat the bill because we thought it was going to be something that was not good for public education. But unfortunately, the bill passed and moved forward. And then after the first cycle of elections, when referendums were on the ballot and a couple of them lost, we were watching TV, and the superintendent said, "These are political campaigns. They're not. We're about educating our kids and doing what's right for our staff and our parents. We don't do political campaigns." And Robin and I looked at each other and said, "We do political campaigns." And ever since then, we've been engaged in now over 40 districts, working with them in community outreach. So it's been quite a fun ride.
Absolutely.
It's been a great ride. I mean, I have a daughter that's a product of public school. She's Pike High School graduate, now at Ball State, here at Ball State University. You know, Jim Schellinger actually got us started with you, if you remember, at Clark Pleasant Schools.
Right.
This was early on, and you were doing what good superintendents do, which is build support outside the district for initiatives that you were trying to do. So we came down, we walked through, we had meetings, we did a lot of work in your district, and the bottom line is that you did a lot of the work that superintendents should do all the time, which is make sure there's public input, make sure that people are involved. So that's how we got started. You have a million people, million kids, million consumers in public schools.
Right.
Now, where else? I mean, that's one of every 6 people in the state of Indiana are in public schools. And when you add in the parents and the teachers and the faculty and all those folks, I mean, it's a juggernaut to our state's economy.
Absolutely.
So we're proud to be part of it.
Well, thank you. And I know that you've been very successful in the referendum campaigns that you have led. I would say probably well over 90% success rate, just guessing off the top of my head. And that's a tremendous asset for our Indiana Public Schools to have you involved. So thank you very much for working with those school communities. So how important is building a local community-based support for public education?
Dr. Coopman, it's very important because the statistics don't lie. About 9 out of 10 voters in the state of Indiana do not have a child in school. Mm-hmm. So 9 out of 10 do not have a child in school, yet you have to win the referendum in their district.
Sure.
So that means that you have to convey a message to them of how important the school is. You know, Pat was talking about he's done districts as small as 200 or 300. We've done them as big as 16,000. But in every one of them, in many cases, they are the home of the largest employer in the area, some of the largest payroll in the area, probably the largest cafeteria in the town.
Sure.
And they also buy more fuel and have more consumers than any other thing in the community. So they are definitely tied to the community.
Well, it's important that we think that you expand your distribution list of your communications. We have found that districts do a very good job of communicating, but they do it to their parents and their staff via an electronic newsletter or something like that. And what we've tried to let superintendents know that they need to expand that database. And Rob and I have shared with them any opportunity that superintendents are at any meetings where they can grab data. If there's email lists available, grab them. And add them to your list so that you can continue to expand that distribution of your message from the district.
Well, one of the things that I want to kind of elaborate a little bit on that Robin mentioned is that anywhere, you mentioned 90% of the people in the general public don't have kids in school. Well, with that being said, that means that we have to do a better job of messaging to everyone in the school community, not just to parents. And I also have told superintendents that everything you do today is pointed toward when you're going to do that referendum. So make sure that you're doing it right, make sure you're staying on message, make sure that everybody is understanding the high quality of these schools that you're leading, because eventually you're going to have that as part of your referendum campaign message. So why not get everybody on board at the front end as opposed to trying to defeat any negativism that may have occurred prior to that? So every day is a referendum campaign in Indiana Public Schools.
Every day is, and kudos to Dr. Paul Kaiser, who invented, I gave you credit, the Dr. Paul Kaiser Gold Card that we used in Beech Grove. Basically, it was an outreach idea. Pat came up with it, and we implemented it, of how do you reach that 62-year-old retiree or 68-year-old or whatever age that no longer has a kid in school, that doesn't come into the school, that at best drives by the school, may not come to the football game, may not come to the wrestling meet. And we started an idea of sending this out to people that were older, that were in the district, I think over 60
or 65.
60 or 65 years of age. We sent the card to them. First weekend that Dr. Kaiser did it, now this is him reporting it to us, but first weekend he had to play Oklahoma, and 17 people showed up with cards.
Right.
And then Nikki did something too, right, in Washington Township?
Yes. She had her first day of opening up where folks could come in and get their gold card. She had over 100 lined up to get in the very first day that they could get it. So
That's
she was,
awesome.
she was extremely pleased with the effort. And again, it gets folks that comes into the school buildings that may not have been in there since they graduated, 40 years ago or whatever. So it's a great opportunity and a great way to show the people in your community that you do care about them and you are inviting them in to see a play, see a basketball game or whatever.
I saw Superintendent Arkanoff in Center Grove. He's doing it. It's part of their newsletter. They have a little scissors around it and encouraging people to cut it out and use it. So it is one way that folks can show up at non-sporting events or at sporting events and be able to show they're part of the community. It's a community tie. We also point out to them that, and Pat's exactly right, anytime that we can get information, think about it, Dr. Coopman, on a Friday night, the basketball arenas are filled with people from the community that are on our campuses watching basketball. So it may be the one focal point of the community on a Friday night or on a weekend.
Yep.
Right now, you're going through sectionals for football, so people are focused on that.
Yep.
So I think that the school community relationships are crucial.
Absolutely. Well, and to your point, I'll use the pebble in the pond with the ripple effect, is that individual that picks up that gold card may or may not use it, but they're going to tell their neighbors about it, they're going to tell their friends about it, and that whole ripple effect, you have no idea how important that messaging is and how good it makes those people feel to be valued in that school community, and hopefully that's going to count in them going to the polls if there is a referendum with a yes vote.
Yes, sir, it is.
Yep, that's the whole point.
Yep.
So, what do the results of referendum campaigns mean for Indiana communities, and what does this mean for administrators?
Well, what it means, Dr. Coopman, is that people believe in public education. I mean, think about that.
Yep.
Charter schools are not doing a referendum. You all are out there on the leading edge asking people three basic things: pay attention, go vote, and support us for a tax increase.
Yep.
Actually, four. But you are winning these things that we've been fortunate to win about 9 out of 10 of the ones we've done. But that reaffirms that there's public support for public education when you do it the right way.
Right.
I mean, time and time again, I'd say that's been the case.
Absolutely right, and I think it just is one of the demonstrates the fact that people recognize in the community how important the schools are, and that the quality of life, the quality of being that they have in their community. They live in that community because they want to for some reason, whether it's their job, their family, they were born there. Well, we are asking administrators and school staff to constantly remind folks about how important the quality of the schools are to the quality of life in their community. And folks, I think, are recognizing that there is a direct link there.
You know, I've told superintendents time and time again, I think they're getting better at it, but we don't do a very good job of tooting our own horn. And school districts need to do a better job of touting all of the things that happen in those classrooms every day, the number of successful things and the outcomes, the number of graduates that are going to college, the number of graduates that are enlisting in the military. Whatever that number is, it's huge. And the school districts are intimately responsible for the success of those kids that are going off and doing great things. And so we need to do a better job of telling that story,
Absolutely.
not just in a referendum campaign, but on a regular basis.
Right, and we tried it even at graduation. We encourage your peers to recognize all of those that are going in the military,
Right.
to recognize those who are going in the building trades, not to just recognize the one kid that got accepted to 7 Ivy League schools,
Right.
because the room around them appreciates that. In that room, we ask them to recognize and ask veterans to stand, and veterans do stand up. They're there in a large number of attendance. We always try to encourage them to do anything they can on their marquees.
Yep.
You're driving by, the marquee is there, whether it's electronic or you do your own lettering.
Yeah.
That's another tremendous way to convey your message.
Right. Yeah. Well, everything that we do, quite honestly, is a public relations campaign. Whether we're talking to somebody in the grocery store or whether it's on the marquee in front of the school, it's a public relations campaign every day. What is effective marketing of public schools, and what type of training is required?
Well, I think the marketing that schools do and need to continue to do, again, is just communication. Whether that is again a newsletter that comes out quarterly, or a newsletter that comes out monthly, or it's an email blast. Again, as we mentioned earlier, the key is expanding that database that receives that information, but also being creative and using the social media aspect of the district's website, for say. Getting members of the community, the Chamber of Commerce president, the local realtor, to do a short video, having your students interview them about the community or whatever, and have those people in the community, those third-party advocates, say how important the schools are to the community. Sure. So you have other people conveying that message that the schools are important, not just you or your staff, but some people out in the community saying, "Wait a minute, folks. These schools are really important, and for a lot of reasons."
Right. Yep.
I also think that you should use people to kind of give a plug to the place we're at right now that are professionals. I mean, look what you're doing. You're having a podcast, right? utilize people that understand the significance of that to help convey your message. A lot of people go on, I mean, school districts can have Facebooks accounts. They can easily use their websites. They can do embedded video. They can do any number of things. Randy in Westview had one of the most beautiful videos I've ever seen.
Yes, he did.
I mean, literally, when it's scanning over and you see Topeka Water Tower and all that, almost brings tears to your eyes. You use the drone. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
The kids come running out on the basketball court and all that. They had I guess, mentally challenged young woman that got a tiara for being crowned something in the school. It just conveyed community all the way through, and had a narrator. I think was a school board member.
Right.
Was a school board member. So that's a prototype that can be replicated over and over again.
Right.
We always tell schools, and you said, don't take a vow of humility here. You got to tell people what you're doing and be proud of that. One thing that we are encouraging some of our clients to do is ask them to kind of do, like when you take a college class, at least when I went to school, there was a little bio on your instructor. It would be great for people to have a little bio on the teachers to realize in that room is somebody maybe with 2 masters that's teaching a kid every day in a chemistry class. Or that the superintendent has a doctorate and this is what they've done. Just simple things like a bio that encourages that on the website would be good.
Well, and that instills a lot of pride. If you have staff that have those degrees and that caliber of talent teaching those kids, the community has to be very proud of their school district by having that kind of people, those kinds of people on staff. And that is a great suggestion. And you were kind enough to send me the video from Westview. And it was awesome. It was really well done. And so in a community that's as conservative as Westview, I'm sure that went a long way.
It did.
The other thing that comes to my mind, I'm hearkening back to the first campaign of Barack Obama and the importance of social media that played in that campaign. And getting those 18-year-olds out to vote. And the use of social media to communicate with the group that's 40 and younger. That's how they relate to things. And so if school districts are not promoting themselves on social media now and in a referendum campaign, they certainly need to be doing so. And that's one of the things that our association has worked on, because our superintendents are getting younger. Their expectations are to communicate with Twitter and Facebook and other means of communication. So we've tried to work on that with that realization in mind. So can you talk a little bit about the importance of social media?
Well, you've got a tremendous role model in Jeff Butts.
Yes.
I mean, he's tweeting all the time.
Yep.
So he has a very strong Twitter account. These last midterm elections also demonstrated for the first time, Dr. Coopman, that people 18 to 30 voted at a higher number than people over 60.
Oh, that's interesting.
For the first time.
Yeah.
So what is happening now is campaigns are orienting themselves to social media,
right?
Which is targeting that audience, which is increasing turnout. One thing that I would ask that you do as you move ahead on social media is that you keep it fresh, that you continue to refresh it. Don't just have a website that hasn't been updated in a long time.
Right. Yep.
Afford that opportunity. Reach out within your district. There's probably somebody that's very adept at social media that might be your home ec teacher or might be something else in the school district. Enlist them to do that. That's what we do when we go to the full-fledged campaign. It's not us making the website. It is somebody local doing it.
Right.
The other thing that I'd ask you do it on social media is tout a graduate or tout a student on a regular basis on what they're doing and what they're, particularly alums.
Sure.
Because public schools, remember, people pick to go to them.
Yep.
It's not like, you just decided that, you were forced to go there. They pick the community, and so do your teachers, staff, and your administrators.
Right.
Well, and social media is so important as well, just because of the misinformation that especially if you're in a referendum campaign, that happens. I mean, we've seen that in every campaign. We tell when we start the effort, be tough-skinned because you are going to be lied about. I mean, there will be stuff on social media that will be absolutely no thing resembling the truth, and you got to have a very tough skin and be able to adapt to that, and also have the restraint not to engage that person and then create some kind of social media firestorm back and forth. So the social media aspect of the communications is actually critical.
Yep. I actually had that experience. I was driving a very, very expensive sports car. I was wearing $5,000 suits. I had 3 blondes with me at all times, et cetera, et cetera. So I was pretty proud of that I was able to. But I also refused to even look at that, because realizing that those individuals can say whatever they want with some degree of anonymity, and they just flat out lie, and there is no recourse. So you're absolutely right, Pat. That is great advice.
Well, and it's one of those things, as we've said, you as a district, you have to be right 100% of the time.
Yep.
If you put anything out and it's not right, then somebody's going to pounce on that and say, look, they're not being honest with us. So you have to be right 100% of the time.
Yep.
The folks that on the other side, they don't ever have to be right.
Yep.
they can be wrong all the time, and there's no defense of that.
Absolutely. So. And that's one of the things that I think that somehow or another, especially younger superintendents and school boards, need to realize. There's a lot of things that people are going to say, and oftentimes they're going to be mean about it. So you have to be thick-skinned, stay on message, stay on point. This is as you mentioned, Robin, this is a political campaign, and so we have to, be thick-skinned about those things. So let's talk a little bit about school board support and how important that is in a campaign.
We think it's critical. And when we meet with any superintendent regarding a prospective referendum, that is probably one of the first 3 or 4 questions we ask them is, do you have 100% board support for this?
Yep.
Because it's pretty simple. If you're out there as a superintendent saying, we need your support for X, Y, and Z, and you've got a board member that's saying, no, they don't, then, the community is going to be, now, wait a minute, I've got the school telling me this, then I've got somebody else from the school telling me this. So it's really something that is almost a death blow to any referendum from the start. If you don't have 100% of your board on support, then you're going to have a very difficult challenge to win.
Dr. Coopman, we've been fortunate. We've won 36 referenda.
Yes.
And we've lost 6, okay? All 6 were because we didn't have an active board.
Oh, that's interesting.
As recently as November 6th, one district where the board member came in and said, I'm not for it, I'm not against it, I'm just going to stay out of it. And it's like, well, really? I mean, you could have told us that a long time ago, but Pat's exactly right. That is a validation point used by people in the community. It would be akin to you being superintendent and you having a deputy superintendent and an elementary school director, and those two telling the community that Dr. Coopman's not right on this issue. Mm-hmm. You have to have unanimity of the school board. And you have to begin to watch. I think you're going to see more and more efforts made by people to run for school board tied to a referenda as they go in the future.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. And I've personally have witnessed that, and whether it's 1, 2, or whatever, and the number is, if you don't have that school board support, the community is going to really begin to question why we need to do this referendum and support it.
Absolutely.
So I agree with you. Now, we talked a little bit about some of the resources that are available to build awareness and involve non-school parents. Are there other things we need to talk about as far as some of those resources are concerned?
I would say the most important is November 6th does not – we're in a very finite profession, as are you. Got to get your grades in on this date, got to close it out this date.
Yep.
For an election, it is November 6th.
Mm-hmm.
There's we can't open it until November 8th.
Yep.
We can't register. So voter registration is crucial.
Yep.
We have done analysis of some districts, Dr. Coopman, where I think the high water mark, there was one district where 88% of the parents were not registered to vote.
Wow, that's high.
Okay, in a public school.
Wow.
So the misnomer used to be, oh, we have 12,000 parents. If they just come out to vote, we win the referenda.
Sure.
But people like Pat and myself say, no, Superintendent, you really have 5,300 registered parents.
Mm-hmm.
The other 6,700 are not registered to vote, sir.
Yeah.
And I've seen I've seen some affluent districts we've done them in, but even in those affluent districts, there was still 40% not
Right.
registered to vote. So there's no correlation necessarily to the affluence of the district. But I think one of the most important things is you're allowed to, under civics, to encourage your students to register to vote.
Yep.
And you're allowed to, under civics, to do outreach to your parents.
Mm-hmm.
We won in a district, Hebron, Boone Township. They had done a referendum one time. They lost by 4 votes.
Oh, my goodness.
So they brought us in to help them do it, and we registered 47 or something, 47 seniors, and they won by 23 votes the next time around.
That was effective.
That was effective. And the same thing happened in Lake Station.
Yep.
If it hadn't been for the students voting there, there would have been a much closer referenda. Yep. So trying to get your students engaged, which is allowable under civics, and get your parents engaged, which I would think if they're taxpayers and they're sending their kids and they're getting 7,000 per child from the state for them to be there, they would want to have an investment by making sure that they register to vote.
And along those same lines, let's talk a little bit about the importance of polling and getting the yes voters into the polls.
Well, the polling is a very good way to get a snapshot of what the community is thinking about and what they feel about the district.
Sure.
So you get an opportunity to ask maybe 10 or 11 questions, and you want to ask them in a general enough way that you're not being too specific on a specific topic, but yet you want to make sure that you can get the public's opinion. We want to ask them, how do they feel the school is doing at spending tax dollars. We want to see what their thoughts are. What are your thoughts on the school and the education being provided? So that is a very good way to take that data from that poll and go back once again to your communications plan and look at that survey and say, okay, here are